We might see changes to the recruiting calendar. 3 different signing days being proposed by the NCAA. What would that mean for TCU and other schools? Plus TCU baseball, they survived. They beat Wazoo in 12 innings last night and moved to 8-0. So we'll talk about all that next. Here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team, and we do it here every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're free and available wherever it is you get your podcast. You can subscribe, to our YouTube channel. Also subscribe wherever it is you listen to podcasts the old-fashioned way in its true audio form. Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever the case may be. Subscribe to those different platforms. Would love to have you join the show. You can comment on YouTube, tweet at me at SimcockSteven. We're going to talk a little bit big picture today. I typically don't get too much into college football as a whole because it's a TCU show. I mean, we talk about the Big 12. I'll talk about big changes within the college football structure as it relates to TCU and to the conference, obviously. But something came down today from Pete Thamel, and actually I think Nicole Auerbach had this first. She reported it last week that college coaches, and it looks like specifically the SEC, has been kind of unanimous in pushing the idea of, hey, we want some changes to the recruiting calendar because it's so frantic right now, and it's such a year-long process between the portal, high school signing days in December and then February, the portal windows that are sandwiched in between that. Then you have another portal window after spring ball. There's just constantly something going on. And so something that they proposed, coaches have proposed at least, or have been in favor of, is maybe moving early signing day up for high school athletes because it would allow coaches, more regimented time. And okay, I don't have to worry about traveling in the middle of December trying to flip somebody or trying to get somebody. Recruiting is always going to be a 24/7, 365 day a year type of thing for college coaches. It just always will be. But there's built in the calendar, there's dead periods, there's times when you're not supposed to be hosting visits, contacting players. And they want some separation between high school signees and players in the transfer portal to allow high school signees to have a better idea of, okay, who are they signing with, where are they going, what's the roster going to look like. And then it could also give portal players the opportunity to sign NIL packages in December to join a new team and kind of hit the ground running. And all this is also happening in the biggest time of the year. I mean, this is going down as conference title games are happening, as bowl practice starting up, college football playoff preparation. With the playoff expanding, you're going to have more teams involved. So instead of, as we've had only 4 teams really involved in this process so far, starting next year, you'll have 12. In the next couple of years, you might have 14 or 16. So the postseason is going to be a bigger spectacle for everyone else, and you'll have more teams involved in that time-consuming process of preparation for the playoff. I think an underrated thing that I missed on when I was evaluating TCU coming into last season and just the idea of kind of where they were as a team and what the coaching staff was doing and evaluating and trying to project what they could do. The coaching staff was pretty worn out going into this year. I mean, Sonny Dykes talked about that. I think it was in his signing day press conference after this recruiting cycle. So in December, they signed their 2024 class, and he just discussed how, not making a bowl game was not a good thing. That's not what they wanted to do. But it did give the coaches the benefit of getting to relax a little bit after coming over from SMU, taking the job. And since they did that, it was just a year-round, there's always work to be done because they had a great season in year one. They ended up going to the college football playoff. Obviously, they wouldn't trade that for anything, but they win the playoff game. They play in the national title game. And then immediately after that, all right, we got to do work in the portal, right? And then spring ball's here, and then summer and fall camp. And so the guys didn't get really any sort of break. And I think, obviously Joe Gillespie, he was asked to leave, and so that's why he ultimately moved on. But he did have some opportunities, it seemed like, at the college level, and the reason that he ended up moving on to the high school ranks was because I think in part he was tired of that schedule. Like, he was tired of just the year-long rat race that is college coaching now. But this is really more about, according to these coaches and what they're saying, this is more about creating some guardrails and giving some more space in between high school recruiting and the portal. So there's not as much overlap, and you don't have coaches feeling like, well, can we tackle both properly? So this could be an advantage for TCU, I think, in the fact that it seems like this coaching staff is really prioritized. We want experienced players out of the transfer portal. That's how we're going to use a lot of our resources. That's how we're going to spend a lot of our time. And so having these kind of designated markers in the calendar will allow for more time to divide and conquer on both fronts, and hopefully bring in higher rated and better prospects in both the high school ranks and the portal ranks. So I feel like if you're going to build this thing and it's going to be sustainable, then you have to have players that are developing. And it's more challenging now than ever because of NIL and getting guys playing time and all those different things. But bottom line is, if you want to stay sustainable, you have to have more continuity. I think one of the issues last season was they just had so much roster turnover that, and this is what we're seeing in college basketball too. Coaches have kind of found a way to navigate it. I think it's tougher in football because you have, you don't have 5 guys. You got 11 guys on the field at the same time, but you got 22 total. And then your players behind them that are your depth pieces and that are also going to be counted on to take valuable snaps in certain situations. You're trying to get everybody trained up, get the systems in place. It's really hectic, and it's becoming more and more like the NFL, and even more so to a point with the roster turnover, because at least in the NFL, they have, some contracts. So you have some idea of, okay, I know this guy's gonna be back next year. In college, it's just free agency every single year at the moment. So Pete Thamel on Twitter today, he had this report. He said the NCAA officials are meeting in Indianapolis this week to discuss calendar changes for signing day. Here's what they're proposing: 3 different signing periods. The last Wednesday in June, the Wednesday following the regular season, and the first Wednesday in February. So the first NIL signing period, and this is for high school athletes, would be a 3 or 7 day calendar period beginning the last Wednesday in June. So we're talking about guys signing before their senior year of high school. So if they know where they're going to go, they go ahead and sign the dotted line, sign the NIL deals, and they're good. They're not only committed, they're signed. And so in theory, they're good to go. That's where they're going to school. Coaches don't have to worry about it. Players can focus on, okay, I can focus on my senior year of high school, playing high school football. I don't have to worry about the recruiting process anymore. The second NIL signing period would be what we now call the early signing day, a 3 or 7 day calendar period beginning the Wednesday following the last FBS regular season contest. And then the regular signing period would be beginning the first Wednesday in February through April 1st. So you'd have a signing period in the summer for guys to sign before their senior year of high school. You have a signing period in December, the week after the regular season ends. So in the week leading up to conference title games, you'd have a signing period then, and then your last one would be in February, and it would extend to April, which is kind of crazy to me that players could wait that long, but I don't think many people would take advantage of that. I mean, it feels like for the most part, players are signing in December now because they want to enroll early and be a part of spring practice with their new team. And so I think most of the people that are signing in December would bump that up to the summer. And then, vice versa, everybody would kind of bump up their timeline a little bit, and you wouldn't see much movement in the February signing period, except for maybe, a few of the big fish that are having trouble deciding, or other players for whatever reason. I like this idea in theory. I think here's my issue with it. I understand from a kind of work-life balance standpoint why coaches are interested in this, or why they think this is a good idea, to create some more continuity within the recruiting calendar, to have some separation between, okay, this is the time of year that we really focus on high school athletes, this is the time of year we really focus on the portal. And it would also give, in theory, some assurance to these high school athletes of, the recruiting process is so crazy now. Like I've been reading articles, or you read articles around signing day about how much these guys are contacted, how much, coaches are reaching out to them, the visits they go on, and just the daily calls and texts and communication. And it sounds exhausting to me. And I have obviously it's a blessing for these guys to get recruited, no doubt. everybody wants to play, or, if you play athletics, you want to play at the highest level, you want to play Division I FBS football. But it's just wild to me, like, how much they're expected to do on top of, playing a high school football season and keeping up with high school academics, and also just trying to live like a fairly normal social life and have fun as in that stage of life. That all sounds pretty crazy to me. So if you give those guys the opportunity to sign in the summer, it helps them, and it possibly helps coaches with roster management too. But I think the bigger problem here for college football as a whole is right now there's really nothing stopping anybody from moving at any time. And we're seeing it with coaching. We're seeing it with athletes. Nick Saban retires, which, hey, totally in his right to do that. Nothing wrong with that. But he retires after the college football playoff is over, when Alabama's season is over. And then Kalen DeBoer takes that job late in the process. So then you suddenly have all this movement at Alabama with players and coaches. The Washington job comes open, and Jed Fitch takes that job. He goes from Arizona. So you've got all this movement happening in like January and February, when things are supposed to be calm and relatively good. And you have player movement happening behind that. You have players that can enter the portal in the spring. You have players that even after they sign their letter of intent or these NIL deals, they have the ability to just kind of go somewhere else. And I totally understand. I'm not someone who is like, because things have changed so much in the last 4 or 5 years. And there's a lot of people that have just complained about like, well, this is what you wanted. This is what everybody wanted. This is what everybody clamored for. Well, like, there's two things can be true. The old model was outdated and it wasn't fair to the student athletes. And for years, the NCAA was working with an outdated revenue model, especially when it comes to football and basketball, that wasn't giving student athletes a fair shake of what they were actually making for these universities. And they never did anything about it. And so, like, legislation got involved, and people found out, well, if we take the NCAA to court, or if, we investigate labor laws, like, they really don't have a reason to do this. They really don't have any legal standing that they can work on. And so their hand was forced, and they had to make changes, but they had no plan of how to enact it. So all these changes just happened suddenly, and there were no guardrails and there were no clear instructions. And so now you've got this really wild situation where players can just kind of leave anytime. I mean, not anytime, but you know what I mean. Like, just in the course of a year, everybody's a free agent at the end of every year. That's not even the type of freedom we see in pro sports. I mean, I guess like in the NBA or NFL, you can force a trade, right? Like, even if you're under contract, you can basically say, hey, you need to deal me or I'm not going to play. And the team can make the decision on how much they value you and whether or not they want to increase that contract, or if they just want to deal you somewhere else. But it's wild to me, like, how much movement we're seeing. And it's not only the players. I mean, it's college coaches too. I was listening to Matt Mosley's show, my former radio colleague, this week, and he had Mac Rhodes on, and Baylor just lost a couple assistant coaches, like their O-line coach, Chris, and I forgot his last name, but he came over from Michigan State. He was there for like 2 weeks, and then he took a job at Alabama. And Mac Rhodes said that rubbed him the wrong way. And I get what he's saying. Like, it's unfortunate for these student athletes. It's not really like, I mean, people take new jobs all the time, but it's not a great look to take a new job 2 weeks after you got one. But at the same time, like, Baylor went and hired somebody else to replace him that they're taking from somebody else. I mean, like, it's a crazy world we live in with all the different things that are going on a week-to-week basis so late in the process. And so I don't know how to solve that beyond these NIL deals having stricter language in them that, requires these players to stay for a certain amount of time, or if they're not going to stick around, like, it's got pretty clear language in it that says, hey, we're not, like, you can leave, but you're not going to get this money anymore. You got to pay back some of the money that you earned through these NIL deals if you're not going to be here and you're going to go somewhere else. But that opens up a whole another can of worms. None of those things are really going to get solved with this. And I don't have a great answer, but in my mind, that's the bigger picture issue for the NCAA and what they're kind of staring in the face moving forward, and what they have to find a way to regulate, or the sport is just, it's going to suffer because college football and college sports in general, it's predicated on loyalty to the university and, in theory, these guys sticking around for a few years. And I totally understand, like, it's well within their right to leave. And if they have that freedom to do it, why wouldn't you take advantage of it? But I think the fans suffer for it. And it's something that, the powers that be are going to figure out eventually. But that's an interesting look at, the new recruiting calendar. When we come back, we'll talk about actual games. TCU baseball, they beat Wazoo last night, Washington State, in 12 innings. So we'll break that down next. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. If you need tickets, I've told you about them before. Make sure you're hitting up the Gametime app. Download that Gametime app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDON and get $20 off your first purchase. Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, comedy, and theater events. And they have another really cool promo going on right now. If you use the code VEGAS100, and you're a new user, you can get as much as $100 off when you buy a big game ticket with code VEGAS100. They have last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. It's easy to find and buy tickets for any kind of event in your area. You can view you can see what your view is going to be from your seat. You can do it all on your phone, and there's no hidden fees. You click on the tickets. They'll tell you exactly what it's going to cost. The Gametime app, Locked On, is a promo code for $20 off. Download that app today. Buy your tickets there, not just for sporting events, comedy shows, theater, whatever the case may be. Gametime, download it today. Big fan of the Gametime app. The best place to get tickets for your next event. Gametime, proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So TCU baseball, the dream of an undefeated season lives on. They're now 8-0. They beat Wazoo 8-7 in 12 innings. Luke Boyers with a walk-off RBI single to end that game in extra innings. Frogs actually loaded the bases in the 12th with nobody out, but Anthony Silva struck out. Carson Bowen had a line drive that wasn't deep enough in the outfield to score a run. And so it came down to Luke Boyers, who, he's a streaky guy at the plate, always has been. He had a rough year at times last year. This season, not off to a great start. Didn't get the start last night, came in later in the game as a defensive replacement. But kudos to him for getting a single there. Kirk Sarloo said after the game he had 2 good at-bats because he had a fly ball that went to the warning track in the at-bat before that. So he battled. He got out there. It got to feel good for him to get that walk-off winner. And, again, this team has done a great job in late-game situations of finding ways to win. And, they did against Florida Gulf Coast a couple times. They've had a few of these one-run victories, which run differential in close games like that, they tend to even out. So you're probably going to drop a few of those too. But I like the approach that I've seen from this team in critical at-bats this season when they've had to have hits, when they've had to get guys on. They've done a great job in late innings of doing that so far this year. Now, the game went to extra innings because of a meltdown in the 9th inning by the Frogs bullpen. They were up 7-3 going into the 9th. Hunter Hodges actually struck out the side in the 8th. And one thing that's been curious to me about Hunter Hodges, he pitched some last year. He was injured for a lot of the season. This year hasn't pitched much yet, but has been effective when he's been out there. I guess it's just they only want to use him as a one-inning guy. Like it's interesting to me that they didn't let him go back out there for the 9th after he struck out the side. Now I know he's going to typically be your 7th or 8th inning arm, right? But they brought in Kyle Ayers for the 9th. And I honestly, I don't like to let people off the hook or make excuses. I honestly don't think Kyle pitched that poorly in the 9th. Wazoo just had some good hits. I mean, he got up 0-2 on a couple guys. All 3 hits that he gave up were singles, and they were sharply hit balls. I mean, they weren't just like seeing eye singles. But still, I felt like he got ahead of the batters. They weren't horrible pitches that he was throwing. Maybe they caught too much of the plate. But Washington State just put some good swings on the ball. And so with bases loaded and 1 out, they brought in Ben Abelt. And, I mean, Ben was locked down last year. You think, okay, this game's over. And he gave up a double. He gave up 2 doubles, and neither of those hits were cheap hits. I mean, they were rockets off the bat. 1 hop in the wall over the outfielders' heads. So one of those doubles brought in 2 runs and made it 7-5. Washington State then had runners on 2nd and 3rd with 1 out and another double after that. tied the ball game. Now, I'll give credit to Ben. Like, he really settled in after that and pitched well to get out of that jam without giving up the he didn't give up the lead completely. Like, they tied it, but he didn't give up the lead, and they didn't have to go on the bottom of the ninth trailing. And TCU really didn't make much happen in the 9th or the 10th or the 11th, but in the 12th finally broke through and got it done. That big hit from Luke Boyers wins the ball game. Going back to the start of that ball game, Ben Hampton got the nod for the Frogs, got the ball to start the game, and he pitched pretty well. Gave up a leadoff home run, but then after that settled in 4 1/3, 6 hits, 3 runs, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. I like what he brings to the table as a midweek starter. His experience, he's going to go out there and throw strikes, do his thing. He does it well. I think he's been a really good upgrade from some of the young arms they had out there in midweek situations last season. Luis Rodriguez took over after that and pitched an inning and 2/3, 3 hits, 0 runs. Chase Hoover pitched an inning of scoreless baseball. Hunter Hodges did as well. And then they go to Kyle Ayers and Ben Abelt after that. They used a lot of arms last night, and I'm not sure who's going to go tonight. Cademan Parker is a name that's been thrown around. He has made some starts in the past and was out last season with Tommy John. But I think it'll be a bullpen game against Arizona. Luis Rodriguez is who I thought would get the nod tonight, but he pitched an inning and 2/3 on Tuesday, so I don't think he'll be available at least to start this evening, but maybe he'll be able to go in relief. But 8-0, another victory, and, man, the team even flat-out mashed. Like, they can hit the ball. A really good night at the plate. Carson Bowen is so good. He had a couple RBI singles. He had a perfect bunt with runners on first and second and nobody out in the 12th that gave them the bases loaded with nobody out because there was no play to make. He just has professional bats. Anthony Silva continues to be hot. Peyton Tole is still really struggling. He struck out a couple times last night. Just looks like the timing's off. And, I think he's got a good enough track record. He's good enough of a hitter that he's going to figure this out. But until he does, it's going to be kind of tough to watch. And so hopefully he can get in a rhythm as the year goes on. But another nice win, and you turn around and play Arizona tonight. It probably won't have your full complement of arms available, but hopefully you can find a way to grind out another victory, and then you go to Globe Life this weekend. So closing out the homestand tonight, trying to get to 9-0 on the season, another 6 o'clock first pitch, cold out there at Lupton Stadium, I would imagine, as they get ready to take on the Arizona Wildcats. And we'll have a recap of that on tomorrow's show. We'll get some audience reaction to close things out next. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. FanDuel, you know about it. Go download their app, or you can find a way to go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Put one $5 bet down. You win that bet, you get $150 in bonus bets. One $5 bet that you win gets you $150 in bonus bets. My goodness, all kinds of opportunities with basketball. Did you guys see how that Mavs game ended last night? Max Strauss hits a 60-footer at the buzzer to sink Dallas as the Cavs beat them at home. Those are the kind of things that you can bet on. Not sure if you want to bet on madness like that, but they got same-game parlays. You can bet on players or games specifically against the money line, prop bets, whatever the case may be. FanDuel.com/lockedon or the FanDuel app. One $5 bet. If you win it, you get $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel, it's where the game starts. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon or download the app today, official betting partner of the NBA. On Tuesday's show, I talked about position battles. I discussed the offensive line, who's going to emerge as the 5 starters for this team on the O-line, and then at linebacker, who will find a way to emerge there. Zoom plays it on YouTube. The O-line will be very solid. Hoover will have a lot of time in the pocket. Man, I hope so. They got to be better up front. I said this yesterday. If you're going to be more efficient in the red zone, and if you're going to find a way to be effective in scoring opportunities and in short yardage situations, you have to block. Now, one thing about all these guys they brought in, a lot of these transfer offensive linemen they brought in, they graded out really well in pass protection on Pro Football Focus. So maybe I'm speculating a little bit here, but given how they ran their offense late in the season, and given the fact that they seem to have prioritized getting O-linemen that can protect the passer, I do wonder if they get ready to really throw the football this year and spread teams out and throw it around. And that's what Josh Hoover is accustomed to. That's what he's done in the past. Now, I do think one aspect of this offense that was missing last year once Chandler Morris went down, and I don't know if it was out of necessity or if it was just because they feel limited with what they can do with Josh behind center. I'm not sure how mobile he is and how well he is at threatening the defense with his legs or how good he is at that. But in most cases, in a Kendall Brown's offense, the quarterback is a threat to run, and having that dual threat really opens up a lot of things that he wants to do. Now, was last year just a case of, hey, we didn't have anybody behind him? Like, our Grant Tisdale was our backup quarterback, and so we didn't feel like we could put him in harm's way and get him hit. That's totally understandable. Or is it just, we don't know if he can do this effectively or if he can really be a threat with his legs. I think we'll see that play out more this season. But yes, O-line has to be better, and I hope you're right, man. I think that's going to be a huge part of how good this team is. And then CJ said, I think Cam and Trent go crazy this year. We have a ton of wide receivers. Hopefully some separate themselves this spring because it seems like there are 20 guys. Yeah, it does feel like they have kind of the same problem of last year, which is a lot of different guys, and you wonder who becomes the go-to threat. But I like the combination they have. I mean, I think they got solid guys on the inside and the slot with J.P. Richardson and JoJo Earl and Major Everhart, Jordan Bailey. And then on the outside, you got Savion, you got Eric McAllister, you have – Dalen Wright and others who hopefully step up. Braylon James, maybe the transfer from Notre Dame, as he emerges as a factor this year. We'll see. But I hope Cam Cook's great. I mean, I don't really question his ability. I wonder, like, how much experience he has and how ready he's going to be to hit the ground running once the season starts. So that's going to be a huge question for him and this team. But I like Trent Battle, I like Cam Cook, and I hope they're successful this upcoming year. We'll be back tomorrow. It's Locked on Horned Frogs. It's your team, and we do it here every day.